Hi, everyone. It's Rebecca Walser. Glad to be with you here for this episode of Crashes and Taxes today. We know we had some issues with our previous recording software, and so we have upgraded to StreamYard, and we're on StreamYard now, so we should not have any more issues. Today, this podcast is going to be somewhat interactive on a visual front. So if you are listening, you will want to come back and watch the podcast if you care to look at this data that I'm going to be sharing with you, because I am going to use some actual charts today to get you the data that I want to share with you. And so I'm talking today about the 3.5 trillion and the 1 trillion. It's really 1.2 trillion. So really the 4.7 trillion that this Congress seems to want to pass. So what has happened is the Senate 2 weeks ago now, almost approximately, just a while ago, the Senate already passed the $1 trillion infrastructure, their quote infrastructure. And this 1 trillion, 1.2 trillion infrastructure is really a blueprint for the additional 3.5 trillion. So what has happened is the Senate has passed the smaller budget that's a blueprint for the bigger budget. The House has passed already, as of last week, the 3.5 trillion, the bigger one. Neither of them have passed the both. So we don't have this yet. But I want to point out a Wall Street Journal article, actually, of all things. And I want to read to you this first 3 paragraphs of this Wall Street Journal article, because it goes and speaks to exactly what the topic is today. Are we irrevocably and hopelessly now Europe? Are we already Europe and we just don't even know it yet? And this article is so apropos for what I wanted to talk about today. So I'm going to read this to you. This is the Wall Street Journal as of August 22nd, and the title is "America Looks More Like Europe All the Time." As you can see right here, America looks more like Europe all the time. And I'm reading this article dated August 22nd. Author is Joseph Joffe. And the U.S. adopts and in some ways exceeds the high taxes and spending that have hurt the continent of Europe. America is the land of predatory capitalism. German Chancellor these names, German Chancellor Helmut Schmidt liked to say, most Europeans who celebrate social justice and the caring state would agree. But if Europeans weren't so leery of America, they would clap their hands in delight at the 3.5 trillion package and the 1.2 trillion infrastructure package cornucopia that is working its way through Congress as we speak. President Biden's tax plans might soon make Europe look like a capitalist haven. By comparison, he wants, and we're talking about now this administration, Joe Biden, wants to raise long-term capital gains tax from just below 24%. Now, what that is the 20% cap gains tax. If you're married and you have taxable income above $445,850 a year, then you jump from the 15% cap gain bracket to the 20% cap gain bracket. So he's talking about the 20% cap gain bracket maximum that we have right now, plus the Obama surtax. That takes you another 3.8% up. So that would be 23.8% for those Americans that qualify for the top capital gains tax right now. That's where he's getting 24%. It's 23.8. It's the top 20% rate plus the 3.8% additional Obamacare tax. So it says, and I'm going to read going back into the article now, he wants to raise, and that's Biden, the long-term capital gains tax from just below 24% to above 43%. And how they're getting that is this administration wants to raise the capital gains tax to 39.6%. You take 39.6 and you'd add that 3.8, and that's where you're basically at a 43% tax. So we're talking about right now taxes on investments. And now the article continues. Switzerland has no such tax. In Britain, the inventor of the welfare state, it has a 20% tax. Max, and Germany has the highest at 26%. So ours being 43% for the top end is literally going to discourage investment income. As a tax attorney, I'll tell you, you might be screaming at me saying, yeah, but Rebecca, you're not being transparent, as you're not saying that it's just for people that are making $1 million. I'm not saying that because I've been through this many times before as a tax attorney, okay? They always start a terrible proposal that they know that the majority of Americans would reject. They always start that at the top end of the market where people can say, because they know what people say, they'll say, oh, that doesn't apply to me, so I don't care, so I don't worry about it. And so people discount it. They don't get involved. They don't call their congressman. They let it get approved. And then all that happens is they lower the threshold from $1 million to $750 to $500 to $250. If you don't think that higher corporate tax rates are going to apply to $250 and above, I'm sorry. It's just it almost is as if I don't even qualify the income anymore, because I know their ultimate goal is to tax capital gains at a much higher rate. And I'm not saying that it's this government's fault. I think it's all the government's fault before this government. This government is at fault for what this government does. But all of the taxes that have built up until this point, all of the money that we did not collect, that we issued as debt instead, has led us now to this point in time. Led us now to the point in time where America is talking about creating the largest tax on investment income in the world. Going back to the article, on income tax, the U.S. may soon top the scale. This administration, Joe Biden, wants a marginal top tax rate of just under 40%, 39.6%, as we already stated. When you add state and local income taxes, California is being the highest at 13.3%. When you add California of 13.3 to an income tax rate of basically, say, 39, if you're in the top bracket, if this administration gets their way, you're looking at, just on active earnings, a tax of over 50%. And then on your investment earnings, we'd have a tax that would be close to also 43%. We will be paying more than the Europeans. We are coming into a time frame where we will be paying more than what Europe has done, that we've seen the tax policy in Europe make them lose while America has burst forward. It's not really a fair comparison because we have leveraged to the extreme the fact that we are the world's reserve currency. And that has been a huge boon for us. I want to read on this last paragraph from this article and then I'll move on. This is the Wall Street Journal quoting the New York Times. The New York Times got it right. The Biden budget promises to reshape government's role in the economy. Don't worry about the bill. A 10-year Treasury note nominally fetches about 1.25%, but at 5% inflation, the net yield falls below zero. Servicing a mountain of public debt with depreciating dollars is a steal. These days, profligacy is a virtue, not a vice. Why fret? It is a free ride as long as the central banks keep pumping money with no cost. Now, that's the New York Times quote. Then the Wall Street Journal comes back in and writes, somebody always pays. The law of economics still apply. Why is inflation climbing on both sides of the Atlantic? The same adage, too much money chasing too few goods. Add the wage pressure caused by pernicious government programs pouring out the most generous income supports ever, and you get millions of unfulfilled jobs. The United States of America has over 10.3 million job openings as I'm doing this podcast. Why look for a job if unearned money matches the after-tax pay? It's rational reflex, though it isn't responsible. Listen, we are all humans. We are all going to do what's in our rational self-interest if it is not something that's unethical. Most Americans will say, hey, and I'm just gonna, this is not me, but I'm just saying, if I could get my income, if I was, let's say, a server, or if I was, working at CVS as a pharmacy tech, if I could get my income replaced by simply getting government stimulus, because it's not just the stimulus of the federal bump up of $300 a month that was supposed to expire really soon here on Labor Day. Janet Yellen already came out and said that the federal government can go to the funds that have not yet been spent by the ARP, which was passed in March of this year, March of 2020, and use the ARP funds to continue the bump up of the unemployment $300 a week yes, $300 a week. That bump up will continue past Labor Day using ARP funds, as according to Janet Yellen. I was looking forward to it phasing out so we could get people going back to work in the fall as their kids were going back to school. That was what my hope was. But when you combine the stimulus that we're getting from the federal bump up of unemployment with the stimulus checks that were handed out when this administration took over, along with the Trump stimulus checks that were handed out with Corona, along with the $300 refundable per child monthly tax credit. So let's say let's say I have 4 kids at home under the age of 19, as an example. If I qualified as an income that, was underneath a certain level of income, then I would be getting $300 a month times 4 children, or $1,200. So you add that $1,200 plus the $300 bump up plus the weekly unemployment. And there's a lot of people that are able to stay home right now and not go back to work simply because of government stimulus. And this is the problem. Are we going to raise taxes to 60 to 70% right now? Because if we are going to become a new Europe, if we are going to go the way of Europe now, which is what all this stimulus is, I'm not taking anything away from the fact that we wanted to stay away from a Great Depression and we need the stimulus to deal with Corona. Absolutely, we need the stimulus to deal with Corona. But we have 3 different therapies in this country that you can go out and take if you're worried about going back to work and interacting with people because of this COVID-19. You can take one of these 3 gene therapies. They're not vaccines in the sense of traditional vaccines, because they're not a dead virus that then goes into a chicken egg, that then we get the antibodies from the chicken egg and we extract that, we make that into a vaccine. This is not that. This is literally instructions. All 3 of these vaccines that are on the market right now, they are instructions to change your DNA through our mRNA, messenger RNA, and it's completely different. It's a completely different technology. It's never been done on humans before. And so it is completely different. And we have to recognize it's completely different. So if you hear anyone saying, oh, well, this is just another shot like anything else. No, it is not another shot like anything else. And we need to be looking at the longitudinal data that we're getting. But if people are not wanting to go back out because they're worried, there are these things. Of course, you can social distance and you can mask if that's what makes you feel safe. And so this is where we are. But what I want to explain to people is we can't, right now, we are having a false choice. And the reason that we're having a false choice is the government is doing this automatically without checking within the American people and asking, is this okay? And for right now, everyone is okay with it because for everybody, it seems like free money. But the truth is, if we are literally going to move into a situation in our country where 1/3 of our demographic is going to be retired, because we know that the baby boomers are going to be going to retirement in the next 7 years. So we're expecting 65 million people to retire in the next 7 years. Between literally having 1/3 of our population almost retired on Social Security and Medicare, having another almost 1/3 school age, 19 or under, that leaves the sandwich generation, which really is Gen X for right now. It leaves the sandwich generation, Gen X, and really the millennials, Gen Y, and the beginning of Gen Z. So we really have 2 generations, Gen X and Gen Y, the millennials and Gen X, with first half of Gen Z, or actually almost all of Gen Z now, supporting not only all of the 100+ million people that will be on Social Security and Medicare, but also supporting all of the 19 and under class that's still in school. And I'm sorry, but those demographic numbers don't work with a 25% effective middle class income rate. And so what you're looking at with those demographics is Europe. You're looking at, if you're in Denmark and you make $60,000 a year, you have a tax rate of 60%. You take home $36,000 on a $60,000 salary because the tax to Denmark is 60%. Now, yes, that includes all your healthcare and all of your education. So you can take those items out of your budget. But I personally don't know anybody who has got a decent lifestyle living on $36,000 a year after taxes for a family of 4. That is a really tight, in America, that would be considered a really, really, tight income for 4 people. So the bottom line is we need to start being honest about the choices that we're making. And we need people to understand the choice. It's a binary zero-sum game. It is 0 plus 1 equals 1, or 1 minus 1 is 0. It is a zero-sum game. So if we are going to continue to stimulate, and we're going to continue to write bills that are $4.5 trillion of additional money, we need to be asking the American public, prior to the retirement of baby boomers, because we're expecting these tax rates once the boomers retire in the next 7 years. So I'm expecting these tax rates into 2029 and 2030. And you should prepare now. If you have a lot of pre-tax wealth, you need a plan to get that money repositioned in these next 7 years. But beyond that, we need to be asking the American public now, in all transparency and all honesty, are you prepared, middle class, to pay 60 to 70% of your income right now? Because if we are going to pay people this much money to literally not be productive parts of our GDP, because when someone sits at home and doesn't work, they are not contributing to our GDP. When you have millions of Americans that are able-bodied, that could go out and work and contribute to GDP, but aren't, because they're getting enough money from our federal government to do nothing, then that is a double whammy. That is the double whammy of the person not working, not contributing to GDP. That's gone. But then the government is creating their income, which the government creates nothing. It is only a transferer of wealth from those who have wealth. So all that's happening is the government is going out and taking tax revenue and shifting it over to the people that aren't working, that could be working, that aren't now contributing to our GDP. So it is a double whammy. We have to come up with the tax revenue, which means someone has to keep working to get the tax revenue, and we also lose the GDP growth. So this is a big, huge problem. And to put it into final perspective for you before I end this podcast, understand that we did not get to $1 trillion of federal debt until October of 1981, which was Ronald Reagan's first year in office. January to October, we finally reached $1 trillion of debt for the first time. So in October of 81 through February of 2020, in that literal 20-year time frame, or 40-year time frame rather, we accumulated $28 trillion of federal debt. In 40 years, we accumulated $28 trillion. In the last 15 months since Corona, we have passed a legislative stimulus of $6 trillion. The Federal Reserve has stimulated another $2 trillion. We've stimulated $8 trillion purely on Corona. And we're talking about passing another almost $5 trillion in these congressional bills that have both half passed each house. So what you literally have is 8 trillion plus 5 trillion, 13 trillion. If this goes through, this 13 trillion will literally be passed in less than 24 months, when it took us 40 years to get to 28 trillion. The floodgates of debt have been opened. And this is a whole nother topic, but I just want to caution you, understand that the world is watching and that the world is ready to pounce on the US dollar. The World Bank, the IMF, the UN, these are 3 global organizations that absolutely want the US dollar to be ended as the world's reserve currency. And if you end the US dollar as the world reserve currency, then our ability to write money, our ability to issue debt and paper is ended overnight, because now no one needs the US dollar anymore. And now we have to live off purely our tax revenues. And let me tell you, to do what we do as the United States without debt financing and to do it with pure tax revenue, you're talking about not a 60 or a 70% tax. You're talking about a tax that's close to 90%. It is the end of America as we know it. So do not think that the world is not watching if we're going to pass another $5 trillion of money that out of thin air, as it just appears magically, printing press is ready to go. The world is watching. And unless you're ready to have a 60 to a 70% middle class tax, then I think you know where this has to go and where it will all end. And there is a reckoning that is coming. And I caution you to be prepared. I am absolutely seeing a market correction, a substantial market correction before the end of the year. So if you're not tracking that and you're not on that and you're not taking care of that, you need to right away. Take care.